is worth much more than visiting the country or hearing lectures from the people from that country. So on the basis of the Estonian School of Diplomacy, we have Eastern Partnership Center, and it offers academic programs for 9 months, even longer, to the students from the countries I mentioned, public officials from the countries I mentioned, and we also have tailor-made projects. For example, officials of those countries who are dealing with food safety with the EU, or taxation, or financial, whatever field. These are really tailor-made projects. And here we're cooperating very closely with the United States as well as with our other partners. Of course, globally, Estonia is contributing to other countries, being it Haiti or Palestine, Zambia, and I can continue naming them. Together with the United States, we have a trilateral project with Tunisia on building electronic government in Tunisia. We have experience. United States have knowledge of that region, knowledge of the country. Tunisia wants to learn from that. Putting three things together, we can develop a development cooperation project. As we have our diplomatic representations in almost 40 countries, we're not represented in sub-Saharan Africa. We're not represented with permanent embassies in Arab countries. The only exception is Egypt. We have embassy in Tel Aviv, and that's that. But today we see that the need or interest in reforms is much wider than only Balkans or the former USSR. It's also in the countries of the Arab Spring, it's also in the North African countries. But as we don't have the knowledge of that region, we can't do anything ourselves. That's why we need a partner. And the partner is the United States, in some cases. Some cases UK, some cases EU, some cases United Nations, which means that in each and every case we have to look very carefully what we can do together. Coming back to the United States, sometimes I'm also asked that, well, the United States is Estonian partner, what are you doing to us? Are you creating any jobs? All I can say is that the Estonian biggest economic investment is in Utah, in oil shale industry. So we very much hope that the project will start working in 2018, 2019, and once it starts, it will provide 2,500 jobs in Utah. So once you visit Salt Lake City, or even go to the place near Vernon, everybody there knows Estonia. Which means that there might be some small things and small niches where we can cooperate. Our trade with US could be much better. But here we are optimistic that maybe the political decision of concluding kind of free trade agreement between United States and EU will finally bring us to the negotiations. And once we have the free trade agreement, it will boost also trade between Estonia and the members of the EU. Because the logic is very simple. Estonians, the better it is in the EU, the better it is in Estonia. The better it is in Estonia, the better it is for each and every person who lives in Estonia. Very simple logic. So we are supporting liberal, free, very integrated trade and development. Cultural relations. Oh, maybe finally, what are the business interests of Estonia? What kind of companies do we have in the United States? Mainly it's IT startups. Mainly in Silicon Valley or in Massachusetts, Boston. Startups, because as I said, ICT is one of the fields where our companies are doing really well. Culture. Well, part of our culture sits here. Hemingway once said that there is an Estonian in each and every port. During my visits to different states and universities, I've discovered that there is one Estonian, at least, in each and every university or community. And those people are the people's ambassadors. They do my life much easier because everybody who knows Professor Rao knows that it's a great country, great people, great scientists, wonderful place to visit. I think that our cultural exchange is becoming more and more intensive, more and more close. And Estonian artists feel more and more comfortable when they open the doors of galleries or institutions, for example, in New York. We are blessed with sports people and we are blessed with conductors, Estonians. I don't know why, but somehow we are blessed with these two kinds of personalities. And we're very open to introduce them to the world, and they are very wishing to participate in the cultural diplomacy, which is extremely important nowadays. And we will never forget that the United States was the country where the Estonians who had to flee the country before, during, and after the Second World War found their home here. Estonia was the country where they found their new home, where they have been part of the community, local community life, part of the country life, part of the culture, and we are very grateful for that. Some words about Russia, yeah? Because I don't know, sometimes when we ask Estonian Russia, well, I don't know, what's the first word, or what's the first emotion that comes to your mind when we say Estonian Russia? Say something. Good, bad, neutral. Negative. No, negative, exactly. And now in 5 minutes I'll try to convince that that's not true. If we look at our bilateral relations with Russia, then again, there are so many layers, yeah? If we look at the political relations, they are non-existing. We haven't had any official visits of any Russian presidents, prime ministers, or foreign ministers to Estonia, or Estonian presidents, prime ministers, or foreign ministers to Russia. Zero. They meet from time to time. They meet in the margins of the United Nations, at the meeting of the NATO, Russia Council, at different meetings. But we haven't had normal bilateral visit. And that's not good. Because even in the case if countries do not agree on all the issues, and there are lots of issues where we can't agree, or where we don't agree today, they have to communicate, they have to talk, they have to listen to each other, and at least they have to try to understand why the other party is acting or thinking like that. What's in Estonia's interest? In Estonia's interest is democratic, rich, happy, governed by the rule of law, market economy, Russia. Because that's our security guarantee. And we are dedicated to doing everything we can to find that end. Coming now lower from the political level to, let's say, everyday business, the contacts between ministries, the contacts between authorities, perfect. We're working on an everyday basis. When I was posted as an ambassador to Russia in 2007, we didn't have the easiest times in our bilateral relations. It was pretty tough. But we were talking, our ministries were talking, border between Estonia and Russia was working, tourists were visiting Estonia in spite of the words of the Russian leaders not to visit Estonia, not to eat Estonian products. Russians are smart, and they remember how good are Estonian milk, cheese, chocolate, and vanadaili, and they wanted to eat it, and they did that, and they bought that. So the relations between ministries and public authorities are working normally. Trade. Russia is our trade partner number 3 or 4. 10% of Estonia's trade is done with Russia. So if I say roughly it's 70 plus with the EU, 10% with Russia, and the rest with the rest of the world. Rest of the world meaning America, China, Ukraine, Belarus, all other countries. 10%. Our partner number 3 or 4. Well, when I was Undersecretary for Trade, I couldn't recommend the percentage to be higher, because nobody wants to be tied too close to the economy of another country. You just don't want to become dependent. So economic ties, excellent. If we come lower, culture. One of the examples I bring, again, when I was an ambassador to Russia, in Moscow, in one evening we had 3 Estonian conductors. Neemejärvi, Andres Mustonen, Eeri Klass. You never see three of them in Tallinn because they are so busy and they have so busy schedules. And they were conducting in Moscow the same evening. Lots of cultural exchanges. I think that it was those who know the Russian culture, Anna Borisovna is performing in Estonia maybe more often, she's a Russian singer, than in some Russian cities. Bolshoi Theatre, Mariinsky Theatre from St. Petersburg, visiting Estonia very often. St. Petersburg has special relations to Estonia and vice versa, because that was the city where the first educated Estonians came from during the Tsarist times. Those were people who went to be professors at the Tartu University. Those were the artists that created independent schools of art in Estonia. So we have very, very strong links to St. Petersburg. Peoples to peoples contacts. If you happen to be in Estonia, starting from the end of December until the 10th of January, I think half of Moscow is there. Because for Russian tourists, it's a nice place to spend their Christmas vacation and have New Year celebrations. They are abroad, not too far, cheaper than Paris. You can speak in Russian, everything. And you have to take with you your families. Russian artists and singers sometimes come to Estonia to perform, and still they remember the singers and artists from the Soviet times, being it Anne Veski or anybody else. So the Russian tourists, they are our, how in Estonian language we say, kullaauk. How do we translate it?
Gold mine.
Gold mine. Because in December they buy everything from the expensive boutiques in Tallinn, which are much more expensive than the ones in Paris, London, or Washington. They buy everything because they come to have party, to enjoy the city. They don't count money, and we love them. They are supporting Estonian economy, and they leave. So the peoples to peoples contacts again, excellent. And if I try to put the whole picture together, then I think it's better to have non-existing political contacts and very good peoples to peoples contacts than vice versa. Because politicians change their minds very easily. And once they see political benefit, they become friends. They look into each other's eyes, they see something there, and they become friends. Peoples to peoples contacts, it never works like that. People need time. People need trust. People need respect. So, putting everything together, of course we are not optimistic about the recent developments in Russia. We are worried when we see what's happening there in economy, human rights, and everything else. We don't want to isolate Russia. We want to cooperate with Russia. We tell it in the EU, we tell it in NATO, but the cooperation has to be open, transparent, and beneficial to both sides. No excuses. Estonia was one of the very strong supporters of Russia joining WTO because it was beneficial for us to have Russia abide by rules of international trade. Whether they are fulfilling the rules or not, that's another question. But it's better to have a set of rules than a country without any rules somewhere. In that sense, we are very supportive of cooperation, but as I said, it has to be open, transparent, beneficial. So we have covered also Russia. And maybe finally a couple of words of cyber and eServices. You know who has been the country, what is the country that has been rated three years in a row as #1 on internet freedom in the world? Estonia. #2, United States. So here is something where again I think we were lucky because all the changes in the internet freedom, in ICT sector, in cyber, took place during the times when we were reconstructing our government, our political system, and our everyday life and everyday work. So it was easy for us to introduce electronic services. One of the first electronic services, when I say electronic, I mean internet service, yeah? For example, when I read in one of the newspapers that there were electronic elections during the presidential elections a couple of months ago, which meant that you could go to the internet site, print the document, fill in, and fax it to another address. That's not the electronic voting I'm talking about. I'm talking about electronic voting that takes place in internet sphere, yeah? So we were the first country to introduce electronic voting in 2005, parliamentary electronic voting. But one of the electronic services that really got the interest of people was taxation. Again, looking at poor Americans to pay huge amount of money to the lawyers or other people to help to fill them taxation forms. In our case, it's pre-filled. It's pre-filled. You can do it on internet and you can do it in a couple of minutes. That was extremely good for people. People were interested in doing that. They weren't standing in the queues anymore. They could go. Electronic health. You're the owner of your health files. So you can send for first opinion, second opinion, 22nd opinion. You can talk to a doctor via Skype. You can do your examination in one place, send the records to another place. You are the owner. It has changed very much the thinking that the doctor is not the priest who tells you how to behave, but you are the owner of your files. And as a customer, you can ask. Second opinion, third, people were interested. Electronic pharmaceutic recepts. Prescriptions. You don't have to go to the pharmacy with a paper document. It's enough to show your ID card and they can see what are your prescriptions and you can buy it wherever you are in Estonia. Of course, once you start with electronic services, you have to give people also the opportunity to use them. So 99.9% of Estonia is covered with internet. Why I say 99.9? Because you can never be sure 100%, but I think it's 100. Because when I see the tourists who come to see the natural, beautiful places in Estonia, they come with their laptops, they have Wi-Fi, they're sending their emails in the middle of the forest or on the coast of the sea, so the services are provided there. Wi-Fi is mainly free. It's free in all hotels, in almost all restaurants, cafes, libraries, schools, community centers. So you have to create the environment that people have the right to use and they have also the possibility, the opportunity to use it. Sometimes we hear that, well, but the older generation. My mother is 87 and we're Skyping every week. And she's very good in doing her bank transactions on internet. Which means that once it's comfortable, people will learn it. They will start doing it. From here we come to the question of cyber hygiene, or how to behave in cyber world, because there are lots of threats out there. And that's one of the reasons why we introduced a call program already for the children at the age of 6. How to be in cyberspace so that you don't regret what you put there and you understand that once there, it will not disappear. In cyber, in Tallinn we have a NATO Center of Excellence on cyber. United States and the main players in cyber world today are members of that Center of Excellence. In Tallinn we have also the IT Center of the EU. So we are becoming kind of EU cyber or eServices capital. And that's important for us. We were the first country in the world to be attacked. I don't want to use the word war, but we had cyber attacks against our government sites in 2007. And we learned a lot from there. And that was the push when we started thinking about it, when we changed our legislation, we developed our legislation, we started close cooperation with other countries on cyber crimes investigation. And we are a country that believes that internet freedom is a human right. And in the UN, we are also among the like-minded countries who are absolutely against restricting internet freedom. We agree that there have to be some rules, but you have to find the right balance between the security and freedom, and definitely not punishing people or not going into the freedom of human rights of different people. And here, I think I covered all the topics I promised to cover. And if we have time, I'm open to the questions. If not, then I'm sorry for taking up so much time.
I think we have time for a few questions.